The Sandy and Toddcast is a Mind Garden media podcast in association with
Screw You, Todd
Productions. It's another episode of the Sandy and Toddcast. This is 3.6, Sandy.
I know. I just said to you, and you make fun of me all the time about this, but I can't believe we're on episode 6 of our 3rd season already, Todd.
Well, we're in the 3rd season, and every episode since the 1st season, episode 1, you've said, I can't believe, and then you fill in the blank. But
I know, but it's so much fun. I love it.
we're using this episode to catch up on some stuff going on with the podcast in our lives, some news that we've been wanting to talk about, all sorts of stuff, so stick around. It's season 3, episode 6. We're calling it Ketchup and Mustard. It's next on the Sandy and Toddcast.
Feeling a bit lost? Not sure what's holding you back? A transformational tarot session with Eclectic Path Wellness can provide the guidance you need, combining tarot and coaching to help you understand and navigate the changes you may face. Heal, empower, and clarify your path. Connect with us on Facebook at Eclectic Path Wellness.
Broadcasting from 2 very different yet magical places not found on any map. Get ready to discuss the strange, weird, ghostly, crazy, spooky, and odd things that take place around us each and every day. All while having a little bit of fun. This is the Sandy and Toddcast.
Here we go, a very interesting catch-up episode that I wanted to call Ketchup and Mustard. I always like to do little twisty things like that.
I liked how you came up with that. Like, were you thinking about that, or was that just like off the cuff?
Well, I ran and grabbed something to drink from the local drive-thru, and while I was there, I just got a little burger kind of thing, and there was ketchup and mustard on it, and I thought, well, wouldn't that be funny if we called it Ketchup and Mustard?
I like it. I'm not going to tell you you're brilliant because I hate encouraging you with that stuff. But that was good. Oh, Lord.
Incredible.
Lordy.
Outstanding.
Yeah, okay. Moving right along. So we wanted to take this episode and sort of catch up everything that we've been doing, what's going on in our lives, some of the funny stuff that we've been coming across, and some of the interesting stuff that we've been coming across. And so this is sort of truly a catch-up episode for us.
Yeah, well, one of the things that's kind of new for us is we're doing another podcast called The Empathicary. Mm-hmm. And it's one of those things where you start a podcast and you kind of have an idea what you want to do, but then it's trying to find the content to share. And this is a little bit different than our current podcast, the Sandy and Toddcast, because it really is focusing on us. I mean, we're going to talk to other people. We're going to have guests on. We're going to do all that kind of stuff. But we're specifically discussing something that you and I have had to live with, even though we just realized it in the last several years of our life, and what it's meant for us. So I think we've got some good topics on the way, and I'm looking forward to that podcast a lot.
Me too. It's the Empathicary, which, again, you came up with that name, and I do love that name.
Brilliant!
Outstanding!
Boy.
Yeah,
bravo! Bravissimo!
Whatever. I like the music, though. I came up with that music.
You did.
And so it's just sort of our personal journey. And, one of the big things of being an empath is learning how to manage it. If you can't manage it, then it will literally drive you crazy. And
if you can't manage it, it's miserable is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to find that sort of that balance, I guess, Todd, between wanting to help people and keeping those walls up so that you don't destroy yourself in the process.
And helping the right people. There are people who want help and who deserve it. And then there are people who want help and deserve it and are willing to do some of the work themselves. A lot of people come to empaths and they want everything laid out and finished for them.
Yeah. They want all the solutions, all the answers.
Absolutely. And they want the work done for them. Mm-hmm. And I guess it's not unlike people who say, well, I should go see a therapist or a counselor, and then they get there, but never really want to do the work that's involved with going through that process. So I guess it's a little bit like that, actually.
Well, and the interesting thing about it, too, is that I've realized that most people don't even realize what they're doing. They don't have to know that you're an empath. They don't have to purposely come to you. They are drawn to you as an empath because your energy sort of
pulls them in.
Pulls them in. And
Yeah.
so a lot of times I've learned to have patience with it. I've learned to be calm about it. And you're right. There are energy vampires. I love that term. But there are energy vampires, people who want you consciously, unconsciously to do all the work for them. They want you to be their sounding board, their venting board, and they want you to have all the answers. And sometimes it's not possible, and sometimes it's not something that you should be doing for them anyways.
Right.
You know? So it's going to be a wonderful podcast. I'm very excited. We're not sure how often we'll do it. It's basically when we have a topic that we want to discuss. It's our journey. It's helping people who are empaths as well. And it's helping people who live with empaths, who have an empath in their life. Not everybody who has empathy is an empath. Empaths are sort of a different breed of person. So it's going to be for just about everybody.
Very much looking forward to that.
Mm-hmm.
and kind of taking that path and seeing how things go there. I know something else we got to catch up on is some of our emails that we get. We get emails from listeners, and sometimes we don't get a chance to share them right away. So we're going to get to a little email today.
Yep.
And I know that there's some weird news that we have not talked about. So there's plenty of stuff to get to on this edition of the podcast.
And one thing that I wanted to talk about, we're excited on the show. We also, for those who don't know, we do the audio version of our podcast, but we also have a video portion of our podcast on our Facebook page, the Sandy and Toddcast, and we call them live casts. And normally every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, that's when we do our live casts. And one of our upcoming guests is Gina, and help me with her last name again, Todd.
Caulk, like you put caulk around a window.
I don't know why
That's how I remember
have such
that.
a hard name.
Remember
hard time
caulk
with that.
around the window. That will help you.
Gina, caulk around the window. She'll be our guest. She is, I'm already looking forward to this. She is an animal communicator, earth healer, which I really want to find out what that means. She deals with past lives.
Yep, multidimensional spirit communicator, energy healer, activator, channel, earth healer. And as you mentioned, she can communicate with animal energy as well.
Fascinating to me. Fascinating. And she's offered us a couple of sessions so that we can see what she does. And our sessions are today. We're taping this on Thursday, and our sessions are today. And I can't wait to see what she has to say.
We're literally just over a half hour away from your session.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to, and as soon as your session's done, I think she's giving us like 30 minutes.
Yeah.
As soon as it's done, I want to know how it went. I want to know everything.
I will fill you in on everything because I have a feeling that some of it is going to involve you anyways. So I think
I hope not.
Well, guess what? Guess what? The evidence is becoming overwhelming that we do have this spiritual connection with each other, and who knows what she's going to come up with. So this should be really super interesting. And, I'm one of those people that's always willing to try new things. I've learned that you have to you can't take in too much at once because you're going to be sort of like that squirrel trying to cross the road and you don't know which way to look. And especially people who have different abilities, you can't take it all in at once because it's overwhelming. So I sort of focus on one aspect of my life at a time.
Yeah.
But this just fascinates me, and I'm so curious to see how this works out. So very excited about that. And Gina Caulk is also on Facebook, so you can check out her page on Facebook. But that's coming up.
Yep.
We are super busy. Super, super busy.
Well, it's October. It's Ghost-tober. So, of course, we're busy. We've got the Thirsty Thursday coming up. We've got audio casts. We got the new podcast. We've got all this stuff and no time for anything else.
Well, I do have time for some paranormal investigations. We actually have one, Fort Schuyler Paranormal Society, my investigation group, of which you are an honorary member. You have the T-shirt. We're doing a house in a nearby county at the end of October, believe it or not, October 30th. And the house was built in 1790 and has ancestral ties to the Revolutionary War.
Oh.
Yeah. And I've already started to have some visions on it. So I'm pretty excited, Todd. I am really excited to get in there and do this. This is our first, other than Dennis Webster's house. Dennis is the founder of our group. Other than Dennis's house, which is most definitely haunted, I've never done a personal residence. I've always done businesses before. So this is going to be really interesting. Can't wait.
So when are you going to share some of these visions that you're having?
Well, it's interesting because my visions usually come to me like when I first wake up in the morning.
Yeah.
Or when I'm not thinking about it at all, maybe before I go to bed. I think it's because you're sort of like, you know how they say that you're sort of like on the cusp of the veil right before you fall asleep and right when you first wake up?
I like the word cusp. If you can use cusp in any way, shape, or form, please do. Sure. There's nothing better than cusp.
The cusp. You're on the cusp of the veil. Well, that's what they say anyway. So I tend to get them a lot then. And it's only once that I've set the intention that I'm going to be investigating a certain place. And so the other night, just before I fell asleep, all of a sudden in my head, this picture, now, granted, I love history. I love American history, but I've always sort of focused on the Civil War. I never really focused too much on the Revolutionary War, so I don't know a ton about the Revolutionary War, just the basics.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden into my head pops this soldier who is dressed head to toe in red with a big pointy, sort of like that, like a triangular shaped hat. Now, not the pork pie hats that you used to see that were flat on the head. This one stood up and it sort of came to a point at the top and it was black. And I just sort of filed that away until the next day because I wanted to get some sleep. So the next day I looked it up and I found almost the exact same picture of what I pictured in my head. And I had no idea. I just assumed it was British because of the red. You know, we grow up, we go to history class and they tell us it's the redcoats. I just assumed it was British, which in fact it was. But one of the interesting things about this is that they called them Grenadiers. The British had different sets, different types of soldiers within their army. And one of them was Grenadiers. And Grenadiers basically handled grenades. They threw grenades. And they were sort of, I don't know if they were the upper echelon, but they were a little bit more dressier than some of the other British soldiers. Had no idea, never heard the word in my life, had no clue. But that's what apparently I had as a vision, and I'm learning how to trust myself with it, so I'm going to go with it. And the interesting thing about this house is that the county, or the whole area, let's put it this way, the whole 5-county area by where I live was part of the Revolutionary War. You know, the British troops would come through these small villages, take them over. They would fall to the British troops. There were deaths all among the land. General Herkimer, we're right near General Herkimer's home, where he was, which is the same county this house is in. We're also near the Oriskany battlefield, where the Battle of Oriskany took place. So there's a lot of bloodshed and a lot of history on this land. So I'm very interested to see how this house, how this land, how this owner who has ancestral ties to someone who lived back in those days, how this all comes together. And I find that a lot of times I put everything together after the investigation.
Right.
So we'll have to see what happens because it's so interesting to me. I'm really super excited about this. And to get a vision like this so early, I'm just waiting to see if anything else comes through as well. So interesting. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, so I listened to your entire story, which is very, very interesting. But the one thing that I focused in on was pork pie hat. Because I've never heard of a pork pie hat. Never. So I had to look it up.
Yeah, I think that's what they call them. But they would sit. They were like triangular shape and they sat on the head.
This says, like, I'm looking up a pork pie hat and it could be pretty much kind of any roundish kind of low hat.
Yeah. And these, the ones they wore during the 1700s, especially in the Northeast where the colonists lived, you know, the colonies were sort of triangular. They would come to a point in the front and then they would have the 2 points in the back.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome tonight Sandy and the Pork Pie Hats. Yes.
Woo,
then a band comes out and they play some Revolutionary War songs.
You know what? That would be a great punk band name, the Pork Pie Hats.
Yeah, absolutely. I've never heard a Pork Pie Hat before, ever.
Really? I was into punk for many years, and so I used to try and think of great punk names if I ever had any inkling to make a punk band, because I think that my voice would fit in only with the punk genre. And so, so that would be it. But I did get a new piece of equipment that I'm going to try out during this investigation. I want to tell you and everybody about it. It's a spirit box, okay? But it's modified so that, and if anybody knows about the spirit boxes, we've seen them all on TV. I have one.
You've got the SB7, right?
I have the SB11.
Okay.
Yeah, I have the SB11, but this is modeled, I think, a little bit more like the SB7. And what it does is it actually mutes about 95% the sweeping sounds that you hear. Because let's face it, spirit boxes can be very annoying. They can be very annoying. And because you're listening to that sweeping all the time.
And if you don't know what it sounds like, it literally sounds like this.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah.
For hours on end.
It overwhelms me. It really overwhelms me a lot. And we've started doing a different type of investigating where we'll have one of our investigators put it on, plug in headphones to it.
Right.
So that they're the only ones that hear it. And we ask the questions. They can't hear us asking the questions, and then they give answers, which helps us. But it's still very annoying, and it's very hard on the investigator. So this is modified to take those sounds away. It will only play the words and the phrases that come through.
Have you turned it on at all yet?
I've turned it on. I've played around with it a little bit, of course.
In your home?
Yeah. And of course, you know, I'm like a Faraday cage. My home is like a Faraday cage.
I don't know what that is either. Now, what is that?
You don't know what a Faraday cage blocks all the community. Like, it'll block all the EMF. It'll block everything. A lot of investigators use it so that they can make sure that outside noise doesn't affect something or anything. It's sort of like it just blocks the EMF.
So Pork Pie Hat. And what kind of cage is this?
Faraday, Faraday. And you can get it. It doesn't have to be a cage. It can also be like they have sort of like pockets or bags you can put equipment in, stuff like that.
Faraday cage manufacturer, best isolation, better results.
Yeah. Yeah, it's quite a big help. But I feel like I'm in one because nothing that I am aware of ever happens in my. Now ask Holly Hughes about that, because she'll tell you that I have people around me all the time.
So does her daughter, by the way.
Yeah, and her daughter does too. And so, which I do believe. It's just that I don't know if it's sort of, not to get off topic, but I don't know if it's sort of like my defense mechanism of trying to block things when I'm in my own home. Maybe I've set unconscious boundaries.
Maybe you've got a Pork Pie Faraday hat, which we don't, this.
I'd love to see one of those together. Let's combine a Faraday cage and a Pork Pie hat.
Man, but, I think your money's going to be made very well on that project.
So, anyways, this piece of equipment was not cheap, but I thought
couple $100. Is that what it was?
It was about $250.
Okay.
So it wasn't cheap. It wasn't expensive, but considering some of the equipment out there, but it wasn't cheap. But I thought it was worth it when you spend $100 for a spirit box and it's annoying the crap out of you. So I thought, well, it's worth the extra. I know. I just can't take that. I'm a very maybe it interferes with my frequencies or something, but I can't
Got
take
any
it
fillings
for very
in your teeth?
long. Yeah, just a couple.
It could be that. How did Dave feel when he found out it was $250, or hasn't he found out yet?
No, he found out. Because I discussed it with him first.
And he said,
well, at first,
you nuts?
No, he understands because it annoys the hell out of him too, because he's in my group.
Right. I know.
So he went along with it, so to speak. I had a little money put aside anyway, so he went along with it. And I think he'll be happy with the results. I just have to watch a video on YouTube so I can see how they actually use it. There's a lot of directions that comes with it, but I'm one of those visual people, so I would rather watch somebody doing it than read about it. But it's very exciting. It's called the PSV11 ANC.
Jesus.
Dual Sweep Frequency ITC Research Device.
Let's just call it George. Okay, from now on, we're just going to call it George.
I'm just going to call it George from now on. So, yeah, so that's exciting. I'm looking forward to this investigation. I'll have to fill everybody in once we do the reveal with our, I'm not sure if our owner is going to be with us that night or if he's going to leave and we're going to go through everything. Sometimes we like to use the people who live or work there as sort of trigger objects.
Yeah.
If things have specifically happened to them. So that's why we did an investigation of a library back in August. And actually the person who takes care of the building and his wife were with us. She's a big paranormal fan. So she was having the time of her life. And, but we used him sort of as a trigger object because things were happening to him all the time.
I have a suggestion for you.
Mm-hmm.
I think when you're going into an investigation, you should buy a notebook and you should name the notebook for that investigation.
Mm-hmm.
And then as things happen, as stories come to you, as visions come to you, you place that in your notebook.
Mm-hmm.
You write it down. Maybe you get some pictures that correspond with what you saw and you put them in there.
Yeah.
And then you can attach any results that you got at the investigation in that booklet too. And here's why I think it's important, because number one, if you're anything like me, sometimes you forget. Sometimes you forget things you've seen and heard and experienced, and it's gone.
Yep.
So you can't. Also, it's another visual way to take the information that you received after the investigation and look back to see if there's any connection. And again, there's no loss of information because you forgot or misplaced it. I just think it'd be a great idea. And then for future reference, when somebody down the line is having things happen, you can pull this out and go, well, look, this is kind of what my life was like. Boom. There it is.
It's really a great suggestion. And I do it to some extent anyways, because I've learned it's sort of like Dave, for instance. Dave gets ideas at night before he falls asleep about what he's going to do at work or what he's going to do for, at the radio station. And he keeps a little notebook and a piece of and a pen next to him on the bedstand so he can write it down so he doesn't forget it. And I've learned that they say you should write down dreams and stuff. I've learned to write down my visions because I'll give you an example real quick. At the library investigation, I had a vision of an old woman. And I also got at the same time, I got a specific name. And because I got the two at the same time together, I thought that maybe it was this woman's nickname. But I wrote everything down, as many details of this vision. It was almost like a little play going on, like a little movie going on in my head. I could see her walking across the floor, how she walked, what she dressed like, what she looked like. And I wrote it all down. And we were in the middle of the investigation. And I'm so glad I did, because I heard the man who takes care of the library and his wife mention this name. And I went, wait a minute, what? And they told me that this name that they were discussing, the man actually works at the library now to this day. And it's a very unusual name. And the only reason I'm not giving details is because we haven't discussed it with the library yet. We haven't done a reveal with them yet. But this name was very unusual. And there was absolutely no way that I would have known this name at all. And I went back to my piece of paper where I wrote everything down. And sure enough, there was the name. And now I'm wondering, and when we do the reveal, it'll be interesting. I'm wondering if either this man who works there knew this woman.
Right.
If she knew him. And what that connection is between the two, because they came to me at the same exact time. Now, in and of itself, just the fact that I picked this name out, this very unusual name, is amazing to me.
Yeah.
How would I know that? But then to be able to put the two together to see if there was a connection somehow. What if he says, "Oh, I remember that lady,"
or says, "That's my late wife," or whatever, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. And so writing down is so important. I wrote down, we did the Angry Garlic investigation last year, and I became very personally involved with the young couple who are there, who are stuck there. And I wrote everything down. And so I was able to, because when you get done with an investigation, especially as someone who is a medium, you're so drained. Empath, medium, all of it. You're so drained. You don't even think straight at the end of the night. And if I don't
think you think straight normally, so I can't even imagine what you're like after an investigation.
It's seriously, like, I can't even think. I just go home and go to sleep. And I a lot of times I think, oh, this wasn't much of an investigation. And then I wake up the next day and I go, oh my God, this was one of the best investigations we ever did, because things start to come to me. But if I don't have that stuff written down, I don't know if I can put things together as well as I would otherwise. Yeah. So it's a great suggestion. And I think a lot of people should do it. And then that way I have something solid that I can look back on 3 years from now.
Show and all that kind of stuff. Sit down with your grandkids, which will never happen. But if you sat down with your grandkids and said, look what grandma used to do, you know. And then they would put you in a home, and then it would be all done.
I know. So it's just super interesting. So I'm looking forward to that when we've got some stuff going on in February. We're going to do some presentations at our local historical society. So it's going to be really cool. Very excited.
So one of the things that we've created with this podcast, the Sandy and Toddcast, is an open door for people to experience the paranormal, the woo-woo in their own way, shape, or form, and not feel like they're crazy or they're stupid or they don't know. And we've always asked for people to share their stories, and occasionally we have people on to share their stories. We had my sister on just recently. We've had my cousin. We've had your brother was on sharing his story. Yep. I mean, we've had a number of guests on sharing their stories. And a couple of weeks ago, we got an email about a story. And I thought this would be on our Ketchup and Mustard podcast. It'd be a great time to get caught up on this email, because we've been wanting to share it for a while, but it never could quite fit it into the right podcast. So should I share it right now?
Yeah, let's do it. I want to read it. I want to hear it.
All right. This is from, it says Dan, Nina Terrible. I'm assuming it's Dan and Nina Terrible. That's the name that came across. But here's the email, and I'm just going to read it, and I'll stumble along because that's how I read. But here it goes.
Okay.
It was the summer of 96, or better referred to as the summer of hell. I can't help to blame myself after all. I've watched plenty of horror movies to know all the basic rules, but even then, I ignored the most important one. I was young and curious, so attracted to anything horror. I played with a spirit board by myself. And if that wasn't enough, I chanted spells, and I found in a spell book that were written in another language. Frustrated at what I thought was a complete fail since nothing had happened, I continued on with this dangerous combo. A few days passed and things began to change. I started hearing strange sounds. For each night that went by, the evil entity became more aggressive. Some call it sleep paralysis, but I feel it was an evil force holding me captive. I can hear the growling in my ear and the voices as it whispered to me, calling out my name. I was terrified. I fought so hard to have just enough courage to open my eyes, and then fear would strike again when I would witness with my own eyes a hooded shadow figure by my bed, and shadow figures darting in and out of the wall while calling my name.
Yikes.
It was getting worse. I can now feel it touching me. It actually touched my foot. It wouldn't let me sleep, and it was as if it was getting stronger. I was so scared, and knowing it was my fault, I didn't want to tell anyone, especially my father. All my family had warned me about tampering with spirit boards. I no longer felt safe in my own home, and every chance I got, I tried to go somewhere hoping that this thing would not follow me. I distinctly remember several occasions where the evil had followed me. My aunt had asked me to stay with her and her family during the week to babysit my little cousin while she was working. I had fallen asleep. Something had disturbed my sleep. I opened my eyes to the light above me flickering on and off. I immediately left the bedroom, fell asleep on the couch for the rest of the night. Another night, I experienced the same exact thing, but this time as I left the room, I heard whispering coming from my cousin's bedroom, which was located right next to the living room. I was confused and terrified. I started to wonder if it was my cousin that I'd been babysitting, only to find out later in the day that he was sleeping with his parents' room the entire time. So he was in a different room.
Wow.
I knew I had to dispose of the board, and when I did, I heard a voice later that night say, "I will come back." Eventually, we moved, and I began feeling safe again. The activity still happens from time to time. I realized later that this thing wasn't a part of the house. I summoned it, and it attached itself to me. I thought I was losing my mind until one day my older cousin had visited. She also is a believer who's had her own personal experiences. We were exchanging stories of strange events, and she distinctly says she heard heavy breathing coming from upstairs. We both looked at each other. She noticed my dog turned toward the direction of the stairs because the dog had heard it too. She lived there prior to me, stated that she never heard that during the time of residency there. So here's somebody, again, pulling out a spirit board, pulling out a Ouija board, and just, you don't want to do that stuff. No. Even we just recently did a live cast with Dennis Webster. And as an investigator, one of the things that he's done that I've never been a part of is a seance.
Yeah.
And he told us about how incredible it was and how powerful it was. And there's a part of me that goes, God, I wish I could experience that. And then there's a part of me that says, God, I hope I never experience that.
I know.
Because I don't know if I want to be in a situation where the energy uses us to communicate. And here's the thing. We talk about energy in a group of people investigating paranormal stuff anyway. I mean, we're still using our energy to do it.
Right.
So is it any different if we're just in a room with a couple of pieces of equipment and a pork pie hat, or if we're sitting in a circle around some candles holding hands? I don't know if there's much of a difference there, but it does still concern me.
Well, I will say this. I think, I won't say most, but I think a lot of people, especially in their youth, use spirit boards. We all have. I had
one.
I had one too, and I had a really kind of a disturbing experience with it. At first, it was funny and fun, and then it turned a little bit dark, and I handled it the way I had to handle it. I was about 20 years old at the time, many years ago. Haven't used a spirit board since. Have not wanted to use one. And am I nervous? I would be very nervous to use a spirit board. And
what about a seance? How would you feel about doing a seance?
Well, it's funny you say that, because when Dennis mentioned it during the live cast, Dennis and I have actually discussed maybe doing one. Dennis feels like my abilities might, just like the founder of his former group had abilities as well. He thinks that I might be able to be a great conduit for that. And I'm sort of going back and forth on whether I want to really try it or not. The excited person in me says, let's experience it. Let's try it.
Yep.
The cautious person in me, because I know what spirit boards can do, is like, maybe we should wait until I'm a little more comfortable with what I can do with my abilities. So it's sort of a fine line you walk. There are so many things with spirit boards that you have to know and understand if you're going to use one, and including how to dispose of one properly. I'm
not sure how to do that. Do you know? Because I'll tell you a quick story. I had a very good friend of the family reach out to me, and somehow they ended up with somebody's spirit board. And I said, burn it, get rid of it, burn it, get rid of it. But I don't know if there's a specific thing that you should do in order to get rid of a spirit board. I don't know.
That's a really good question. And we should talk about that on a future episode, because I'm not 100% sure. I haven't been around them in 30 years, and I was only around that one. And after that incident, I was done. I did not burn mine. I probably should have burned mine, but I also knew somebody at the time who understood them. And I did some closing sort of a closing ceremony on it and everything. They tell you should close the board when you're done so that things cannot get out. But if something's out, who's to say that it went back? Those are things that you have to worry about with a spirit board. It's not a game. It was made as a game in the 1800s before people understood what was actually really truly going on. It was right around the spiritualist movement, the birth of the spiritualist movement.
Right.
And so people thought it was a game,
Which,
but
by
it's
the
not
way,
a game.
That movement was pretty freaking crazy.
Yeah, and we should talk about there's the Fox sisters who were from New York State, who were big and very well known during the spiritualist movement. Maybe we should do an episode on the spiritualist movement. It was so interesting.
I love it. I just quickly Googled how to get rid of a Ouija board, and you know that Google has all the answers.
Mm-hmm.
So this says how to correctly dispose of a Ouija board, and then it gives some things. You can ignore it. That's one thing you can do.
Yeah.
You can bury it.
Mm-hmm.
But most people advise against damaging the board by burning, cutting, or other actions. So
I want to say that I closed it. She showed me how to close it, and then I think I just threw it out. I just think I put it in the garbage.
There's a
I don't think
landfill
I did
someplace with
anything.
your Ouija board
With
hanging
my
out
Ouija
there with
board.
ghosts and stuff.
Yeah, I know. It wasn't a horribly dark. It wasn't demons coming out, but or was it? I don't know what did it. But that's for another episode, but it was very interesting, and it's something. It was strong enough of an experience for me before I even knew anything really about the paranormal world or the woo-woo world for me to say I'm never touching it again. So take it as you will, but that was 30 years ago and I won't go near them.
I think, too, for people who've never had an experience, there is a want to have an experience.
Yeah.
And so you will do just about anything to have that experience.
Yeah.
And if that means picking up a Ouija board, that is what you will do. If that means walking into a black mist, that is what you will do. But seriously, when people really want to have that experience, sometimes they don't think about the outcome as much as having the experience.
Right. And that's the point. That's the big thing. There's nothing wrong with wanting to have an experience. It's part of how you learn and evolve, having those experiences. It's opening yourself up to the possibilities of that. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you're going to do it, you have to go into it at least knowing something about what you're doing. It's not a game. It is not a game.
Yeah. And just know that whatever you do, doesn't matter if it's a Ouija board or not. If you involve yourself in it, there is risk.
Yeah.
There is
anything.
risk, period. Life is a risk, but certainly if you're doing this kind of stuff, there's a risk. So you gotta be careful.
I go into every investigation, every situation that I'm in, knowing that I'm taking a risk. But you also have to take steps to mitigate that risk as much as you possibly can, to go into it as safely as you possibly can, And we joke about the fact that, I do this or I do that. But I truly feel that if I was in a dangerous situation, I would walk away from that situation.
I would hope so. I just wonder, so you've walked into a black mist, you've danced on a grave. Yeah. When do you dance on a grave while being in a black mist? That's what I want to have.
You know what?
Next.
You know what?
While wearing a pork pie hat.
If something presents itself to me, Todd, I'm going to go for it. And I'm going to yell your name while I'm doing it.
Next time I want you to go, hee hee, like Michael Jackson with a pork pie hat on. And,
oh my God, I'm going to be hearing about that pork pie hat for the next week.
What, you beautiful souls? I'm so excited to have this platform where I can share my gifts, the things that I do, what we need to do as a collective energy to really step into soul's path. Reiki and healing and alignment. Oh my goodness, these are all so very important in what we do. I have a daily podcast that I do. You can find me on Spotify and Anchor for your daily vibes, your energies as a collective unit, right? You can also find me on my Facebook page where I really go more in depth with it, but you can find me at Mystic Karma by Victoria.
This is the Sandy and Toddcast.
So I guess you've got some weird news. You want to pick one or two and we'll just go with it?
Yeah, let's just talk about a couple of them. I have a funny one to talk about, and I have one that's kind of interesting and woo-woo. There is apparently a haunted house for sale in Troy, New York. And Troy, I live just outside of Utica, New York. Troy is about an hour and 15 minutes away from me to the east. It's just outside of Albany. It's sort of one of the burbs of Albany.
Okay.
And it's called the Ensland Mansion. It just hit the market maybe a month ago. The owner, Michelle Bell, says that it's very, very haunted. It's been on shows on TLC, Discovery. Paranormal investigators have gone through the house and they have found a bit of evidence. I say a bit. Here's the part where I think she's a little bit wacky. Okay, with every haunted house, there might be a little bit of wackiness somewhere in there. She says she keeps some of the rooms locked, including the basement, because of, quote, scenes of spirit activity. And she says the asking price of $444,444 is a spiritual number that she's sticking with and she won't be changing.
So why is it 44, 44, 44? That's my question.
That's some sort of spiritual number to her.
Okay.
Okay. Now, whenever you have a house owner, now we have a law in New York State that you have to, if your house is haunted, or if you believe your house to be haunted, you have to disclose that to your buyer. So that makes perfect sense that she would put it on the market saying it's haunted. I get that. Where I'm a little concerned is the fact that she keeps some of her doors locked. She has scenes of spirit activity, or what she calls scenes of spirit activity. The price on her house is a spiritual number. Does it cross the line a little bit of, is this lady wacky, or is this, let's say most homes have a little bit of activity somewhere in them, whether
Right.
it's the house, the land, the owner, it doesn't matter. Just thought it was kind of interesting that she seems to be a little far on the woo-woo scale, and not your typical owner that says, okay, by law, I have to disclose that it's haunted, but I'm, a regular person. This is what I believe.
So I looked it up really quickly. Again, Google will help you find anything.
That's right.
GOOGLE.com. And yeah, it is for $444,444. It's a typical older home.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's really nothing overly crazily special about it. It's a nice shape. It's my style of house. I love it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a beautiful house.
Yeah. I don't know.
I don't know. Is there a point where, maybe she wants it to be really haunted, and if investigators have been in there with only a little bit of evidence, does that constitute very haunted, or is maybe she just really wants it to be very haunted?
Well, and here's the thing. And here's the thing. The person who lives there, that energy feeds. So
Right.
if she is open to, or is a little woo-woo herself more than normal, there may be more things that happen for her than the next person who walks in that doesn't
Mhm.
believe at all,
Mhm. Yeah.
I'm just looking at pictures of her, and this is just total judgment on my part. She does not look like she's overly crazy. You can tell that she's probably
Right.
a little woo-woo.
Mhm.
But other than that, I mean, it looks like a normally perfect little house. So
I
don't
just find
know.
it very interesting. And I wonder if when she moves to her next house, if she's just going to find that to be very haunted as well, because maybe it is her and not the house.
Could be very well part of the issue, at least. Yeah.
So just an interesting story. Dave and I take rides once in a while, and maybe we'll take a ride out and check out the house someday. Maybe I'll see if I can get an energy off of it and what we can do, and just find out what it actually looks like in person.
In one of the pictures, they put it in the newspaper, obviously, and they've got some pictures of her and stuff. And she's got this big trunk that she's opening up. And inside the trunk is all this old stuff. And one of them is the newspaper that's doing the story. It's a newspaper from November 2nd, 1950 inside the trunk.
Interesting.
So there's a ton of stuff in that house, too.
So it's just an interesting story. I think it's kind of interesting that she has a spiritual number amount on her house.
Don't you think that's kind of a trick? That's a selling trick.
Yeah, I think so. Well, that's kind of my point is where do you draw the line?
And in this market, more than likely somebody's going to come in a little bit under that or a little bit over it or something. She's not going to walk away with 444, 444. It's not going to happen. Unless she
just is going to end up staying there. Who knows? We'll have to keep an eye on this. I'll have to keep an eye on it.
Okay.
But I do have another really funny one. It has nothing to do with the paranormal, but I saw it and it just cracked me up, Todd. What's the most embarrassing thing that you've ever done while drinking? I haven't drank to the point where I do. I'm usually the peacekeeper. I'm usually the babysitter. I'm usually the one that, makes sure everybody gets where they need to be, that kind of thing. I have had a time or two where, but for the most part, I'm not. Have you ever done anything super embarrassing while drinking?
This is a long time ago. This is more than half my lifetime ago. We played strip poker one night for no reason. And then the pizza person came to the door to deliver. And I was losing the game. That's all I'm going to say. But yes, that did happen.
I love it. That's funny as hell. Oh my gosh. See, even if we're best friends, you find out something new every day.
Yeah.
There you go.
I don't apologize for that, by the way. Well, whoever they were, they know who they were. They got a nice little gift that evening.
They got a tip. So
literally.
So this is a funny story. A man in Turkey who met up with some friends one night and got really, really drunk. They were out at the pub and they got super drunk. He wandered off and he wandered into a forest while really super drunk. He ended up joining a search party. Eventually, I guess he slept it off, and the next day there was a search party, and he joined the search party in a rescue effort to find himself. See, the man had been reported missing by his family the night before. So after he found out it was him that the searchers were actually looking for, the police gave him a ride home.
How nice of them.
He found himself, Todd. That sounds like something, you know what, my friend Karen, that sounds like something Karen would do.
I've never been so drunk that I've blacked out and not, and wound up on a search party for myself.
Can you imagine he was looking for himself?
Hey, we're looking for this missing guy. Okay, I'll help. Wouldn't you, at that point, knowing that you slept in the forest, go, I wonder if they're looking for me? Wouldn't you say that to yourself?
Well, who knows? He may not have been, the sharpest tool in the shed.
Obviously.
So that was really funny. It happened in Turkey, but I'm sure it happens in the United States quite a bit. All that drunkenness and funny, embarrassing moments. So he'll probably never live it down with his friends.
Well, certainly not. All right, we got to wrap this up because here's why. 8 minutes, or actually 7 minutes from right now, Sandy is getting a phone call from Gina Talk.
I'm so excited.
And there's going to be some sort of woo-woo thing going on.
Yep.
And then as soon as it's done, Sandy's going to call me and fill me in.
Yes.
You don't have to call. Don't call me. I don't want to talk to you, but just send me messages.
All right, I will. So you can make fun of me for that.
Correct. I'll make fun of you for all of it.
Thanks. All right, everybody.
Listen, I just shared with you that I opened the door naked while playing strip poker and drunk. You've got plenty to tease me about.
When was it? That was back in the 80s?
No, not that far back. early 90s. We'll just leave it there.
Okay.
Early 90s.
Well, people did that a lot in the 90s. I don't know.
Really?
I don't know.
I'm going to Google that in Google. Did a lot of people answer the door naked in the 1990s? Let's see what it says. All right. Make sure to like us on Facebook. Join our group, Stay Weirdos, Friends of the Sandy and Toddcast, I think, or something like that.
You got it right. I'm so proud.
Listen to our podcast. Share it with family and friends, all that kind of stuff. And join us on our next live cast as soon as you can.
Yep.
All right. Good luck with your reading, whatever you got going on.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.